Resident Evil never actually ends, it just relocates the crime scene. The year is 1998. Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield walk out of Spencer Mansion alive. Their report doesn't leave the building. That's why today I'm breaking down what happened after every single mainline Resident Evil game, and what it actually cost the people who lived through it. Starting with the night everyone remembers as one explosion, the night that buried the story and cleaned up the paperwork before anyone had to answer for it, Resident Evil. The Spencer Mansion incident is often remembered as the night the heroes blew up the monster factory. The real story is a paperwork failure dressed as a victory. 4 people walk out of that forest with a first-hand account of corporate engineered horror, and the company they're accusing walks away completely intact. It's 1998, and the timeline starts ticking tonight. Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield make it out of the mansion. So do Rebecca Chambers and Barry Burton. The lineup fans settled on after years of arguing over the game's multiple endings. The mansion has more branching outcomes than a choose-your-own-adventure book, but the surviving 4 became the version most of the fan base accepted as canon. The self-destruct sequence goes off right before they clear the grounds, and the timing is the point. The survivors torch the lab notes, the mold, and the reanimated test subjects wandering the basement on their way out, doing Umbrella's cleanup for free. Efficient, if you squint. What's left afterward is 4 traumatized witnesses and 0 physical proof, since the mansion and the samples went up with everything else, leaving personal accounts nobody official has to believe. Umbrella's own copies of the research survive untouched, filed somewhere that never caught fire. That's exactly the kind of evidence a corporation with lawyers and a police budget knows how to bury. Jill and Chris carry that story into a department with every incentive to file it and forget it. And they'll spend years watching that silence cost everyone else who isn't them. A cover-up holds fine when the evidence is one building on one mountain. Within weeks, the evidence had a population of 100,000, a working sewer system, and it was walking down public streets in broad daylight in front of people holding cameras. Resident Evil 2. By October 1998, the United States erased one of its own cities in under an afternoon. One afternoon. Call it containment. Most readings call it the erasure of a corporate secret, too. 2 months earlier, the mansion cover-up meant torching one house and hoping a handful of survivors stayed quiet. Raccoon City scales that logic to 100,000 civilians, infected block by block, overwhelming police and the military alike. A haunted house with a body count becomes a metropolitan area collapsing on the evening news, with a corporation's name attached to the cause. Leon S. Kennedy starts his first day on the force and finds a city eating itself. Claire Redfield arrives looking for her missing brother and finds the same thing. Neither signed up for a viral apocalypse, and both survive it, carrying Raccoon City into their missions for years to come. Washington's answer is a missile. Rather than risk the infection crossing city limits, the government levels Raccoon City, killing everyone inside. Umbrella takes the hit. Its labs are gone and its name becomes shorthand for corporate poison, yet the company fights on in courtrooms and boardrooms. A missile erases a whole city, and the stock ticker does not even flinch. Fans still argue over whether this game or its follow-up marks the outbreak's true end, and most timelines award that final chapter to the sequel, one where the streets outside are still crawling. Jill and Chris walked out of a mansion with a story their own department buried. Raccoon City hands investigators 100,000 death certificates and a crater nobody can explain away, a much harder thing to bury. Erasing a city still leaves a paperwork problem. The handful of people who signed reports about that mountain are alive somewhere, and something was engineered to walk through streets and find them by name. Resident Evil 3, Nemesis. Umbrella built a weapon with exactly one job: erase the last people who could testify about what happened in that mansion. Jill Valentine survived it anyway. That survival cost her a city. October 1998. Jill gets out of Raccoon City with hours to spare, and the United States government makes a call nobody in this franchise had made yet. Skip containment, erase the address from the map. A missile finishes what the mansion fire couldn't, a few months earlier. 100,000 people, gone along with the paperwork. Umbrella built Nemesis to hunt a short list, the surviving STRS members who walked out of that mansion carrying a story their department wanted buried. Jill and Brad Vickers sit at the top of it. Efficient hiring practice for a pharmaceutical company. And I say that as a guy who's organized events by vibes in a group chat. Then the government's decision reframes the whole problem. Umbrella spent 2 games quietly erasing witnesses one at a time. Washington skips the subtlety and erases the witnesses, the evidence, and the city block by block from the air. The mansion cover-up that started with one torched estate just picked up a national budget. Some fans will argue over which one carries the heavier ending. That argument skips past which game actually shows you the crater. This one. Jill walks away breathing. Raccoon City doesn't. That trade becomes the template that defines the series from here on out. A missile is thorough about one zip code and useless everywhere else on Earth. The family that built Umbrella had held property far outside that blast radius for generations, and somebody was already boarding a flight toward one of those addresses, chasing a single person who'd gone missing there. Resident Evil Code. Veronica. 15 years. That's how long Alexia Ashford sat frozen in a private stasis chamber, perfecting a virus, while Raccoon City still believed it was dealing with a local outbreak it could contain. Claire Redfield doesn't know any of that. She's just looking for her brother. She gets arrested infiltrating an Umbrella facility, shipped to a prison island off South America, and dropped straight into a family business that makes the city she just escaped look like a rounding error. Umbrella, up to this point, reads like an American pharmaceutical company that lost control of one branch office. Code. Veronica throws that out. The Ashford estate runs its own labs, its own private army, its own bloodline of heirs bred and groomed for genetic research, operating on an island and later in an Antarctic facility that has nothing to do with Raccoon City and never needed it. Alfred Ashford dresses in his dead sister's clothes and talks to a wax figure like she's still alive, which is one way to grieve. Alexia wakes from stasis 15 years older on paper and completely unaged in the mirror. Chris Redfield lands separately, hunting the same company from the outside, and the siblings end up standing in the wreckage of a facility that was doing this work long before their hometown had a reason to be famous. The missile that flattened Raccoon City didn't touch any of it. That decision reads like the company trimming a branch to protect the tree, the same tree Jill and Chris tried to expose back in a mansion nobody believed them about. Claire gets her brother back. What she gets alongside him is proof that the war just got a lot bigger than one city, one report, one buried police file. Fans call this one of the most consequential entries in a game that gets far less mainstream attention than it deserves, and the ending backs that up. Claire and Chris walk out organized, hunting the company instead of running from it. Chasing the family across the map drags the question backwards instead of forwards. Everything inside that mansion was already moving the night before, on the same mountain, and one survivor of that night walked straight into the story everyone thinks they already know from the beginning. Resident Evil 0. Forget Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine. The first hostage of the Resident Evil timeline is a rookie medic named Rebecca Chambers, and she survives 2 collapsing Umbrella sites in the same week before the mansion opens its doors. Worst resume booster ever? The Ecliptic Express looks like a routine transport, though nothing on record confirms that, and it turns into a slaughterhouse on rails. Rebecca escapes by running into a training facility built as an executive school, and later repurposed for biological weapons testing on a captive population, and that facility burns too. It looks like Umbrella already had a system in place for disasters like this, trains and labs waiting to be discovered, long before Raccoon City made the news. You could call that playing dumb while running something very deliberate. Billy Cohen walks out of that facility a convicted killer who helped her survive it, and the franchise barely writes about him again. If his paperwork trail died with the people who could have filed it, that would explain why. Those officers and scientists likely didn't survive the outbreak either. Nothing since has confirmed where he goes or what he becomes. so his fate stays exactly where the evidence left it, open. Rebecca does survive, and that survival is the entire point. She walks off one ruined Umbrella site and directly toward the Spencer Mansion, where she rejoins what's left of Bravo Team, which is precisely where Resident Evil 1 begins. The company's testing network turns out to be a habit, and she's living proof the pattern was running before anyone in Raccoon City noticed. Quite the resume update. Every collapsed site so far shares one name on the deed. A single company folding under its own secret sounds like a problem you could shut down until the next outbreak arrives wearing no corporate logo at all, and whatever is steering those villagers was never manufactured in a lab. Resident Evil 4. A cult that answers to nobody made Chris and Claire's years of burning down Umbrella look like they were aimed at the wrong target. Los Illuminados runs on its own authority and its own funding, and it never asked Umbrella for permission to exist. Leon S. Kennedy walks into a remote Spanish village looking for one kidnapped president's daughter and finds an entire congregation carrying a parasite that spreads through the nervous system instead of the bloodstream, a worse commute than he signed up for. Las Plagas is the escalation that flipped the whole model on its head. The parasite keeps its host walking, talking, and passing as a normal person, and it decides on its own when that person needs to attack. Villagers go about their day looking exactly like villagers until the voice in their skull gives the order. Ashley Graham comes out of that compound alive. Leon refuses to linger in the cult's territory, and the operation blows Los Illuminados and its Las Plagas pipeline wide open. That survival keeps Leon inside active government service, and he eventually leads American bioterror operations. Ada Wong walks out of the same collapsing operation carrying something in her bag, and she leaves with her actual agenda exactly where it started, unexplained. She gets to keep it that way, and nobody in the room stops her. Fans still argue over whether this is the best action horror game the franchise ever built, an argument that runs alongside the claim that this is where the series traded horror for a rocket launcher. If you squint, both debates are describing the same turn, from a mansion full of the infected dead to a village full of the infected living. A parasite still needs a body to steer, and a body can be shot. Somewhere ahead is a flooded farmhouse, where the infection has no single skull to aim at because it grows underneath the property like a root system, and the family living on top of it might as well be this season's fruit. Resident Evil 7. Biohazard. Ethan Winters walks out of a burning farmhouse and doesn't know he just became the fourth name on an invoice that started in a mansion outside Raccoon City in 1998. That invoice has one line item every time. Burn the site, keep the sample. Spencer Mansion got a fire. Raccoon City got a missile. The Baker property gets flames too. Except this time, the thing catching fire is only the visible part of the problem, the part that happens to have a roof over it. The Baker family's rot, the crawling shapes in the walls, the videotapes of relatives losing their minds one at a time, all of it traces back to the mold, a fungal growth spreading under the estate that traces to the megamycete, working through the family's blood and the property's groundwater before Ethan's car broke down outside Dulvey, Louisiana. Umbrella's scientists spent decades chasing viruses that needed a host and a syringe. The mold spreads by contact, by inheritance, by proximity, and it keeps operating people who are technically already dead. That is the scale the earlier cleanups never faced. An organism networked through groundwater and inheritance. A city can be leveled. A lab can be sealed. A mansion can burn to its foundation and take the evidence with it. An organism that treats the building above it as scaffolding rather than storage does not care which of those happens. And the game's ending confirms the infection reaches well past the farmhouse walls, into a research effort that outlives the family entirely. Resident Evil 7 also drags the series back into a house, a flashlight, and a door nobody wants to open, undoing an entire action movie decade in one deliberate swing. Fans still argue whether that counts as survival horror reborn or survival horror cosplaying in a new engine. Either way, Ethan drove to Louisiana for one person and left as evidence in a file that traces back through a burned lab, a nuked city, and a mansion. A handful of investigators barely escaped alive. Every fire in this story was lit to end something. In a flooded Louisiana cellar, the root system just kept growing back. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.